Often, when we use the term so bad it's good, we often mean that the item in question is so unfeasibly bad that it is in some way brilliant. When we see movies with terrible editing, terrible story and terrible acting, it is because of those terrible elements that stop the movie from being just plain bad and make it unintentionally funny. And often, the movie is only funny unintentionally, and never funny intentionally. But what if I was to tell you that is not always the case? I am Chris Hall, and today I bring you The Werewolf of Washington. A Werewolf in Washington is a movie that takes the bold decision to combine the bloody, gory world of politics with the complex, seedy world of werewolves. The movie stars Dean Stockwell as Jack Witter, a journalist who has moved to Hungary after having a fling with the president's daughter. He moves there for no apparent reason, but he lives there with a woman who may be Hungarian, or Dutch, or Martian, just given how much her accent travels. Sadly for Jack, he's in Europe, where all manner of evil, mystical things live, such as creepy cyclists, Angela Merkel, and werewolves. Sadder still, he's attacked and bitten by one of them, and I'll leave it up to your imagination which one it is. Jack then moves to Washington, where we meet a cast of terribly written characters, and he becomes the president's press secretary. Then disaster strikes on the night of a full moon, where he turns into a werewolf man. Will Jack cause chaos in Washington? Will this affect the president's approval rating? And will we ever find out what is being sold in the closing down sale? We'll soon find, kind of sorta out, Will. The movie gets off to a choppy start from the very, start. After the film's opening monologue, the lead has a moment with a stick.
Boy, it's silver. I found it in a little shop. I didn't think there were such things left.
What's it for?
You mean you don't know?
I didn't edit that, by the way. That is the scene in its fullness. And it kind of highlights, I think, the major problem in this movie, in which scenes don't end, they just stop. As though to say, well, that's all we got, before shuffling back into the shadows like someone who's just made a major social faux at some kind of social event. It's strange because it's not only that the scenes just stop, they also start randomly as well, often with little to no continuity between the two scenes, which makes the whole movie, particularly in the earlier stages, feel like some kind of strange fever dream, which can lead to some rather odd moments. One minute we're in the Pentagon, and the next minute we're in the power station from The Incredible Melting Man, which they do kind of sort of explain in a kind of strange way that power station is a secret lab unto the Pentagon, but it doesn't stop it from being, well, odd. The film's plot is very, very, very typical of a Wolfman movie. It goes everywhere you would expect a Wolfman movie to go. It even ends the exact same way that you thought a Wolfman movie would do. And even though the fact that it is a werewolf in Washington, it adds absolutely nothing to the movie. It doesn't influence the story or the plot in any way, shape or form, bar some very frivolous ways and for the sake of satire, if nothing else. Which is disappointing, but, you know, given the quality of everything else in the movie, one can kind of not be that disappointed by that fact. Now, this very straightforward and no frills approach to writing the plot also extends to the writing of the characters in the movie. Our supporting cast are just so utterly wooden and two-dimensional that it's just like watching a bunch of cardboard cutouts shuffling along screen. Of course, there's nothing really offensive about any of the characters, and they're not at all cliched or stereotypical, as that would imply that they were at all written in the first place. They just kind of exist and fade in and out, much like the film's editing.
It was a werewolf, you racist pig.
Every single character in this movie has a little bit that they do. We have the president who says ambiguously yet political things.
Settle it any way you want, but just make sure it doesn't fall back on my lap or the Attorney General.
We have the judge's wife who is southern.
And they want to give it to the communists. Just give it.
We have the old doughy guy who is abrasive. We also have the president's daughter's new boyfriend who is...
Now, maybe he did do it.
And we also have... No, wait! We do have the president's daughter! Right, now part of the film's plot, a key element of the film's plot and its setup, is that our lead character has had or is currently having a relationship with the president's daughter. She is a character who is key and crucial to our lead character's history, his motivation, and the reason why he went to Europe, and kind of, as a result, the reason why he was turned into a werewolf. And as such, one would expect that a character who is so key and important to the entire film's plot would do something significant and important, and would do things to illustrate that fact. You know, like having lines and having things to do. But she doesn't. She hardly has any lines, and she does next to nothing. And when she is on screen, she's just such a horribly bland wooden actress, delivering some terribly written lines that you worry that if she stood still in IKEA for too long, someone would think she's a kitchen table.
God.
I have never known of a character be so key to a film's plot and story and crucial to a character's history and do absolutely nothing for the entirety of the movie. It's so ridiculous. You have to ask the question, was there really any point of writing her in the first place?
Jack! Jack, I think I could be your friend, Jack. If you could just accept that. I'd like to be. You don't look well, Jack.
She's supposed to be the ex-current girlfriend of our lead character, but she does nothing. And the two of them share absolutely no chemistry with each other whatsoever. It's like watching... No, wait, tell a lie. Our lead does show interest. He does show some love towards this character. He does show that he cares about the president's daughter. He emotes this very well. She, for whatever reason, simply cannot compute this. And as a result, it's like watching a man fall in love with a brick wall. There is a lady at the start of this movie whom our lead has been staying with when he was in Hungary. He was probably shagging her on the side as well, who is, well, a better realised and better put together character than the president's daughter, even though her acting is more or less on the same level as hers. I mean, this is best illustrated when she's being attacked by the werewolf, where she emits a face which is supposed to convey fear, but in reality just looks like she's got trapped wind. The reason, however, that she's a better character is that, well, she fills the role in which she's designed for. She's only really there to illustrate that we're in some part of Europe and to spout off some exposition about werewolves and such, and she does that role to the degree that it's needed. She does it horribly, but at least she does it.
Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
Now, in all seriousness, we must consider this point. Does the film succeed in what it sets out to do? This film is a horror comedy. Is it funny intentionally as much as it is funny unintentionally?
Won't you bleeding hearts be surprised?
Well, Yes, oddly enough. And I say oddly enough as it's not uncommon for film studios and filmmakers to rebrand their horror movie a horror comedy when they realise that their movie is about as scary as feeding the ducks in the local pond. And within this movie, there are a fistful of genuinely funny jokes, which, granted, doesn't make the film a laugh riot by any means of the imagination, but I do kind of wish you spent more time doing this as a comedy and less trying to make it a horror at the same time, as the jokes, once again, are fairly well written and well delivered.
All right, keep acting like he's a president, but he's still a human being.
And it is a shame that they decide to muddle all this in lame attempts at horror, as these attempts at horror just fail spectacularly in every way. Whenever the werewolf kills someone, he kills them off screen, and if we're lucky, we may see the end result in it, which usually results in some poorly paid extra being rubbed in jam and having to pull a face like a surprised haddock. There are, however, two moments in the movie where we see the werewolf actually attacking someone. The first time, whilst once again not horrific in the slightest, you still get some minor appreciation for the physical performance of the wolfman. Not brilliant, it's not like Andy Serkis quality, but it's still better than the majority of Wolfman performances. The second one is just plain difficult to watch. Not because of its content, but because it's poorly lit, poorly shot, poorly choreographed, poorly developed, poorly paced, poorly placed. Part of the reason why this movie fails to be at all scary, apart from the fact that it looks like our victims are being attacked by Rupert the Bear's crack-addled cousin, is because the movie is lacking in any kind of atmosphere. Now this is due in part due to the terrible editing and the fact that we have a cast of characters whom none of which are at all sympathetic at all, really. We have characters which are literally introduced to the movie with the sole entire purpose of them being killed off in the very, very next scene.
You and I, we don't see eye to eye about most things. Never asked for your support, and I've never received it.
What am I really supposed to take from a character being killed off that I've only just met? Scared? Why? Because she's about to be mauled to death by Paddington Bear? Am I supposed to feel at all intrigued by it because you say that this character is a journalist? Is there some political intrigue here? Or are you trying to suggest some kind of satirical element, that you're trying to satirise the relationship between politicians and real-world media? Because if that's the case, then you've done nothing to really make that seem to be the case. It's not clear, or funny, or at all coherent. The editing is ridiculous, so we can't really get any kind of build-up to it. So we have a character that we don't care about. What about me caring? I should be caring if this character's getting killed off. Otherwise, if I don't care, then what's the point in you putting them there in the first place? Why is this happening? Who is this? What's going on? Or what about Scarecrow's brain? In fact, you don't need to make me care about the cast, just make me care about the lead. It's his struggle that this movie is centred around, and I am confident that our lead actor could have made us care, at least slightly. His performance in this is solid and frankly undeserving of a movie like this. Granted, he's no world beater here, but he's making a damn good run of some horrible material. Had the film's makers spent more time writing and developing this character, both in the writing stage and in performance with him, then we would have had a more sympathetic, more tragic and more believable lead character. And with sympathy comes fear when the bad things happen. When fear, there comes dread, and with dread comes the dark side. Sorry, I mean, with dread comes atmosphere, and with atmosphere comes some horror.
Go away now!
Jack!
Granted, that alone wouldn't have been enough to elevate the movie into being a genuinely good movie, but at least it'd been something to improve the overall quality of it. Granted, this is kind of a hindsight thing as the movie has been said and done, but still, if it only was a little bit more refined, it would have been a little bit better of a movie, and maybe even been able to lift itself up to the position of being a cult classic in a odd kind of way, rather than being one of those strange little movies that nutters like me really like to watch. So, the big question, can I recommend it? Yes. Despite my misgivings over the film's quality as a horror movie, the comedy side of things gives us a movie that can be just as funny intentionally as it is unintentionally. The special effects of this movie are terrible, and the editing probably some of the worst I've ever seen in a feature film. But in an odd kind of way, it does add to the film's charm and gives it a level of unintentional humour that most other similar movies miss out on. And the performances do range from being non-existent to terrible, but most of the characters do have a decent line here and there that will make you laugh and will justify their existence. Well, some justify their existence, some not so. All in all, it's a very, very strange, very odd movie that, though its plot is painfully straightforward, it still finds time to throw you the odd curveball along the way. So, there we have it, The Werewolf of Washington. An odd, terrible movie that is oddly, terribly good, in a strange kind of way. Now, incidentally, this movie, as long as a fistful of other public domain movies, were cobbled together to create the movie President Wolfman, which I'm sure is a brilliant, awe-inspiring tale for all the family. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to find out and try and figure out how a movie that is in the tradition of can be in the tradition of when the movie that it is in the tradition of came out a full 8 years after the movie that is claiming to be in the tradition of. Or something. I don't know. Numbers hurt. Goodbye.
Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.